Well, the Ontario Liberals are venturing into uncharted territory with the announcement to sell off part of Hydro One to help pay down the debt and invest in infrastructure. QP has come out against it, as have the Ontario NDP, but one group that is applauding it is the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario. And Andy Manahan is with the Alliance and joins me this afternoon. How are you, Andy?
Very well, Ed.
Other than this means investment in infrastructure, which your association would benefit from, why is this good for Ontario?
Well, I think some of the assets that the province has held for a long time could be run a little bit more efficiently. Now, certainly what we've heard with this Hydro One IPO is that it's going to be staged and it's not going to be entirely sold off. So there will be, I think, room for improvement with different groups, perhaps directing it. But from what I understand, in terms of the rate-setting process, there will be no increases and that they will be monitored very carefully. So in terms of consumers, I think that's probably still good. And in terms of maybe running Hydro One more efficiently, that's the government's goal. I'm not an expert in Hydro One, but that's what the Wynne government has stated is going to happen.
Yeah. Now, in terms of that, selling off assets also means losing revenue, though.
And you know what? There's people a lot more qualified than me to read those sort of tea leaves. I'm really an infrastructure advocate here, and I think the returns on infrastructure in terms of being the backbone for Ontario's economy is really what we're focusing on. And the good thing about the announcement that was made by the Ed Clark panel as well as the Premier herself last Thursday is that the funds that are coming out of these asset sales are going to be going into a trust account, the Trillium Trust. And so for once, people will be able to see that monies that are going into something are not just going into general revenues. This is going to be used for a very specific purpose, which I think is a bit of a sea change.
And why is that important?
Too often, things go into general revenues, priorities change over time, and governments lose focus. And I think the Wynne government is so committed on infrastructure investment that they recognize that they need to set up this special account. Otherwise, we'll go back into the same old, same old.
Andy Manahan, Executive Director of the RCCAO, joining us this afternoon, and they're very supportive of the Ontario government and its move to sell off a section of Hydro One, and of course that money would go towards paying down the debt and invest in infrastructure. And in terms of infrastructure in Ontario, where are the biggest needs?
Transportation is across the province, drastically needed. In urban centers, of course, we need greater public transit. In more rural environments, definitely roads, bridges, and that sort of thing. But even the underground infrastructure, sewer and water, there are some issues here and there with aging infrastructure.
Now, you would also like the province to look at high occupancy toll lanes as well.
Correct. If I was going to put one caveat on our support for Wynne's announcement, it's that you can build all the transportation improvements that you want, but there's nothing in this that's really designed to address congestion management. And some of the research that RCCAO has done says that things like road pricing and parking pricing are the other side of the coin. So you need to make the investments, but if you need to manage those roadways to make sure they're not congested all the time, some cost per kilometer is the way to do that. So certainly around the Greater Toronto area and Hamilton area, there's the 407 ETR. There are HOV lanes, high occupancy vehicle lanes. The government has talked about high occupancy toll lanes, and what that means is that single occupant drivers are permitted to drive on the HOV lanes at a price like you would pay for the 407, which is approximately 30 cents per kilometer.
Oh, so that's how it would work.
Yes, yeah. So it's a joint HOV hot lane. So it's not eliminating one or the other. And typically, emergency vehicles or rapid transit like a bus, they're allowed to drive in the HOV lanes for free in any case.
All right. Andy, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate your perspective.
You're welcome.
All the best.
Okay, take care.
You too. Andy Manahan is Executive Director of the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario, and they're applauding the Ontario government for selling off a section of Hydro One. In particular, the fact that they're going to put a good chunk of it on, I think it was $5 billion, on the debt and $4 billion into the Trillium Fund that he was referring to. So it was all for transportation and infrastructure. And it becomes a little more transparent as opposed to going right into general revenues. And I thank Andy for joining us.